What's up? What's Gucci? What's good? It's your girl JB the Glue. Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're gonna get into that interview that Kendrick Lamar did with Harper Bazaar. It's gonna be a little different because normally I do super research, highly scripted content, but today I thought it'd be a little fun just to give y'all my raw interpretations of some of the responses that he gave. If you are one of them people that like super researched, highly scripted content, no worries. I still got more of that on the way. So go ahead and subscribe if you haven't already. Or don't. Reverse psychology. Nah, but for real though, subscribe.
Catch me when you see me, when you see me greet me, or you'll catch a beat.
Okay, so boom. This interview was done back in August. So this is post the pop-out show, but pre-Super Bowl announcement. Fun fact, Kendrick is only the 5th man to get a solo Harper's Bazaar cover. It kind of makes sense since it is a high fashion magazine geared more towards women, but you know, still an interesting fact. Kendrick personally asked to be interviewed by SZA, and according to the person who transcribed it, I believe her name is Caitlin Greendridge, it lasted about an hour and a half. One thing I will say about this interview, it is a lot of mental gymnastics in both the questions and the answers. SZA was low-key the perfect person to conduct this interview because it's more about mental health and spirituality than it is about music. But you know, come on, it's Harper's Bazaar, not Hip Hop DX. We should have known what to expect when we saw who was putting out the interview. If this interview were to be about music, I wouldn't be opposed to someone like Doechii if it was someone from TDE, because I feel like her and Kendrick would have a good rapper-to-rapper conversation. But just so you know, this ain't that. Although they do touch on, no Diddy, not like us for a little bit, it's not really what we would want the conversation to be about. I'll just say it like that. One thing I wonder is if SZA got a chance to come up with her own questions or if they gave her a guideline of what they wanted her to talk about. And I am pretty sure that Kendrick and or his team got a chance to screen whatever he was going to get asked before he even sat down. SZA starts the interview by straight up just asking him about his mental health. She says, "Do you feel like you suffer from mental illness or experience it ever? Or do you just feel like you're in a multitude of feelings and you're not putting a label on it?" Kendrick replies by saying, "I grew up with the term. I was hearing it when I was 5 and 6 years old." To me, it just kind of sounds like a roundabout way of him saying that either he was dealing with it when he was younger or that he witnessed people around him deal with it. It's probably a little bit of both, to be honest. From past interviews, Kendrick has said that he was a pretty quiet and introverted kid, and that seeing death at a young age, like either from people in his neighborhood or friends that he knew personally that died due to gang violence, all that kind of affected him. SZA goes on to ask, "So you identify with it, but not as it?" And he replies by saying that it's all an experience. "I say some shit on a record and I identify with the moment, and then I don't identify with it anymore. It's just growth for me. All that shit is subjective." Which to me just sounds like he's saying that he feels his feelings and then he moves on, which should be the goal for everybody, but honestly it's easier said than done. It's real nice to just be mad or to be sad, but honestly, if you want, in his words, growth, you kind of gotta build a bridge and get over it. And he is an artist, and they do tend to express themselves with their art. So in a way, he's saying Section 80 Kendrick is not the same Kendrick that you got on Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers. Shit, Euphoria Kendrick is probably not the same as the Kendrick that we got on Watch the Party Die. SZA then goes, "It's giving self-therapy." And Kendrick replies, "I think I'm going back to my inner child. I'm trying to understand myself, trying to find people I could relate to, how to identify myself outside myself. It sounds crazy to a lot of people. I can really see myself outside my body. When I do that, I have no judgment towards it. It's too many eyes on me to not remove myself. That shit is too scary to anybody else." SZA then asks, "Are you scared?" And Kendrick says, "No, because I've learned that I can't identify with my performances on stage. I can't hold my whole true identity to the person who's on stage, because if I did, that means I will judge every moment, every time I fuck up a lyric, every time I'm off key. It's too much to deal with. So I have to have a distance between the performer and the person I close my eyes and I look at the ceiling with. I had to develop that tough skin at like 16, 17 years old, not knowing it was not only for my career, but for myself. It's mental illness for sure." From all that, I pretty much gather that to him, Kendrick Lamar the artist and Kendrick Lamar the person are two separate entities. And I feel like that's a common sentiment among other artists and actors, just celebrities in general. It's probably a way that he keeps his ego in check while also protecting his own sanity. Like, come on, there's already 1,000,001 people judging everything he says and everything he do. It make no sense for him to do it to himself. And chasing perfection would drive anybody mad. The conversation then shifts into them talking about spirituality. SZA asks him if he's ever done ayahuasca, and he says no. I kind of think that question was kind of funny because in the song Meet the Grams, Kendrick does recommend that Drake do some ayahuasca so that he can do his own little soul searching.
Therapy's a lovely start, but I suggest some ayahuasca. Strip the ego from the bottom.
A part of me feels like maybe she was trying to be a little shady, maybe not. I could be grasping at straws. Comment down below if you can see it. Comment down below if you don't. I just wanted to put it out there. From there, she asked about his own spiritual practices. How many spiritual practices contribute to your day-to-day? Kendrick replies, all day, every day. She follows up by saying all day is ceremony, and Kendrick says, ain't no bullshit, ain't no cliche, but I literally talk to God. Like, it's to a point where I'm starting to think I'm going crazy. But then he has to remind me, no, this is really me. My early morning practice is that I have to run. When I started running, that's where I started to understand. There was this threshold of pain in the spirituality for me. I remember my shins was aching and I was like, I got 1 mile to go. Then I get whispers and downloads and I start talking about shit that I want to know about. The next thing, I'm 3 miles in, 4 miles in. I wake up, I do that shit every day. SZA says, loss of self, you have to break yourself. And Kendrick replies, I have to. I kind of sort of understand what he's saying right here. Whether or not you believe in a higher power, I feel like you should at least acknowledge that for some people, just having something to believe in is enough. In his case, his relationship with God is probably how he keeps his mental in check. There are probably thoughts and opinions that he doesn't feel comfortable expressing to another human being, even if that person is like a licensed therapist or something like that. And instead of letting it eat away at him or letting it just turn around in his brain, he'll go for a run and talk to God about it. And after 2 or 3 miles, he's like, all right, cool, I feel good now. At least that's what I feel like he's saying here. Honestly, I don't want to touch too much because, you know, spirituality, religion, all that is, you know, it's kind of like a testy subject. It means different things to different people, but that's kind of what I interpret from what he's saying. After that, SZA asks him what was his top 3 contributing factors to self-transformation in the last few years. He replies, the power of honesty and being honest with himself, perspective about the person sitting across from him, and learning that vulnerability is not a weakness. And he says that the vulnerability one is the one that he was still working on. She asks which one was the hardest, and he says again, the vulnerability one. She asks why, and he says, we talk about our childhood. I hate going back to that. It's traumatizing. My pops, he was tough. He was militant. As far as every day, you're expected to go to work, take care of your family, get back up and do it all over again. Being a man type shit. And he never showed any weakness. He never showed any emotion that would garner a one-up from the person sitting across from him. And I learned to experience that, not knowing I had them same traits. But for what I do, there is certainly no growth without vulnerability. If I understood the power of vulnerability earlier, I could have had more depth and more reach to the guys that was around me in the neighborhood coming up. You know, our parents, they never had these outlets to express themselves the way they wanted to. I've always looked at us as somewhat of a beacon of hope for them. If you ask me, those 3 things kind of align with the Kendrick Lamar we've seen in recent years. And Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers is low-key kind of proof of that. Kendrick has never been one for the tweets. He's not about to hop on IG Live to rant, and his interviews are far and few between. Yes, for years in his music, he's talked about his life, his experiences, his family, stuff like that. But something about Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers feels like a real raw look at all the things he's been dealing with in the background. Real man in the mirror type shit. The topics of this album were probably super sensitive subjects for him. So before he even put it out, he probably had to have some real honest conversations with himself. To be able to write songs like We Cry Together and Mother I Sober, he had to have perspective of the person sitting across from him. And to even put this shit out for our consumption shows a crazy level of vulnerability. To me, it's actually funny that he says that vulnerability is the one that's hardest for him because we are in real time watching him try. Like, for example, he made his Finsta public, which was probably a huge step for him. And he's still low-key kind of posting on it regularly. After that, SZA asked when was the last time he cried and when was the first time he cried. He says that the last time he cried was, surprise, surprise, on Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers' Mother I Sober, because it was a really deep song for him. This brings me back to Drake's Family Matters, where he fully misinterprets the meaning of that song.
My mom came over today and I was like, mother, wait a second. That's that one record where you say you got molested. Fuck me, I just made the whole connection. This about to get so depressing. This is trauma from your own confessions. This when your father leave you home alone with no protection, so neglected. That's why these pedophile raps and shit you so obsessed with is so excessive. Embarrassing.
Now having sort of kind of an idea of how much that song means to Kendrick, I'm pretty sure he was fuming that Drake was trying to throw that in his face. As for the first time he cried, he says, the first time I allowed it to happen is documented, actually on stage in 2011 when Dre and Snoop and the whole West Coast was out, and it was like, this is the torch we're handing off. Dre passed me the torch, and a burst of energy just came out and I had to let it flow. My tears is all on the internet, and now I look back and I love that moment. I love that happened because it showed me in real time expressing myself and seeing all the work I put forth actually come to life in that moment. And funny enough, on another one of Drake's diss tracks, Tailor Made, he actually, again, tries to throw that moment in his face with the Snoop AI, and Snoop's AI was actually talking about that whole situation. So again, yeah, I can see why Kendrick does not like that man. After that, SZA asks him basically what's next. And he says, it's funny, I was asking myself that this morning. I get fulfilled sharing my experiences with the youth and allowing them to hear these stories and hear these experiences and catch up to them. So to actually answer your question, it's communication just with people in general. And I feel my work in music is just the start. I don't think it's my end goal. I know it's not my end goal. Music is just a vessel to get me there. SZA then asks, do you have an idea of what you're supposed to do? Kendrick says, I don't. I'm curious, and that's what keeps me energized. She then says, do you even have a desire specifically of what it should be, or are you going to let God shape it? He says, I'm going to let God shape it. I love the mystery of it. I have to have it. I have to. Honestly, him saying that music is just a vessel to get him to his next step in life isn't much of a surprise to me, because if we're being honest, music is almost never the end-all be-all for artists nowadays. And if we're going to take this a step further, being an artist as big as he is probably especially true that he wants to do other stuff, since he probably feels like he's achieved most of, if not all of his musical goals already. It's probably why he started PG Lang. If you didn't know, it's not a label, it's a creative communications company. They specialize in shit like music, art, film. It's basically a media company. He probably just wants to be creative in all ways that he can. And honestly, more power to him. I'd love to see what he does next. But me being selfish, I do hope he does not stop making music and do us like Rihanna is. After that, she asks him, what does he want most if he wants for anything? And Kendrick replies, information. I want it all. I want the resources. I want to meet people smarter than me. I want to talk to them. I want them to show me things. I just want to be fulfilled with whatever the world has to offer. The shit hypes me up. Information. I'm a motherfucking nerd for it. And to be honest, if you ask a man who can literally buy himself anything in the world that he wants, what he truly wants, information is a great answer, because knowledge is power. If he truly does want to move on from music and to do bigger and better things, he's going to need information to do that. He's going to need to know the rooms he needs to be in. He's going to need to know the people he needs to speak to. He's going to need to know how to conduct himself in different scenarios, situations. So yeah, that's a great answer, to be honest. Then SZA says, you have such father time energy. It's very universal dad vibes. Actually, it's more universal senpai. It's almost gender ambiguous. It's father and mother, because you actually seem quite in tune with your feminine energy. Do you consider yourself in touch with your feminine side? Kendrick says, I have to balance both. At first, all I knew was the masculinity, and I always kept that wall up because of my pops. But the more I delved deeper into my music and the more expressive I got with myself, that is the feminine energy right there. That's not the bravado I grew up seeing all the time. This is who I am, the soft-spoken me, and I have to own it. This is where my superpower lies, because if my job is to communicate, I need to be able to communicate with everyone. I need to be able to sit in front of a SZA and talk to you in a way where you feel comfortable, in a way where it feels authentic for me to you to me. I can't do that with the wall up. I can't do that with my full masculinity. This all ties back to their conversation earlier about vulnerability, because being vulnerable is usually seen as something very feminine, and most men are taught that being feminine is wrong. So if you view vulnerability as a feminine trait, but at the same time you're trying to be more vulnerable, in a way you are getting in touch with your feminine side. After that, they finally get into the conversation about Not Like Us. SZA says, "Can I ask you a hypermasculine question? You can also tell me to shut the fuck up. What does Not Like Us mean to you?" Kendrick, laughing, says, "Not like us is the energy of who I am, the type of man I represent. Now, if you identify with that man that I represent," SZA then stops him and says, "Break that down for me." And he continues and says, "This man has morals, he has values, he believes in something, he stands for something, he's not pandering. He's a man who can recognize his mistakes and not be afraid to share the mistakes, and can dig deep down into fear-based ideologies and experiences to be able to express them without feeling like he's less of a man. If I'm thinking of Not Like Us, I'm thinking of me and whoever identifies with that." You remember how I said at the beginning of this video that this interview was filled with a bunch of mental gymnastics? Well, this response right here, oh my goodness, it's the Simone Biles of them all, to be honest. I'm gonna start off by saying that I don't think that he's speaking literally. When he brings up his morals, his values, the type of man that he is, it seems more like the meaning behind why he made the song, not necessarily what the song means to him. Stick with me here. I'll try to see if I can make this make sense. Him and Drake have been compared to each other since basically the start of both of their careers. But on Not Like Us, Kendrick is saying that he is nothing like Drake, and then goes on to list all the reasons why he's not. Yes, he does call Drake a PDF file, but a majority of the song is Kendrick doubling down on Drake being a culture vulture, and why he doesn't respect how Drake moves within the culture. It honestly says a lot that Kendrick would drop such a slanderous song and then stand on its 10 toes. Not Like Us draws a clear line in the stand, puts Kendrick firmly on one side of that line, and then leaves it up to everybody else to decide what side of the line they want to be on. Another thing I want to point out, it had to have crossed Kendrick's mind that dropping a song like this would open himself up to criticisms, right? Because, for example, Baka got a weird case. Why is he around? Shit, the same can be said about his mentor, Dr. Dre, who has, I think, 3 domestic violence cases. And then there's the thing of how long has he thought Drake was a PDF file? Did this start long before the battle? If that's the case, why did he wait till now to say something publicly? And then to go further, would he have said something if this back and forth never happened? These are all valid questions that have come up since the song has dropped. I feel like he kind of addresses these criticisms when he says that he's a man that can recognize his mistakes and is not afraid to share those mistakes and experiences and is able to express them without feeling like less of a man. To me, it feels like he's almost saying that he knows that he's not a saint himself and is not afraid to say that. But at the same time, with the part about him not pandering, kind of feels like he's saying that he chose to make this song. No one pushed him to do it. And he did it because he thought, to him, it was the right thing to do. After that, SZA says, "Now can I say something else in that realm, or do you want me to get away from that? Can I ask you something else?" And Kendrick asks if it was mean. To me, that was funny as hell, and it makes me wonder what kind of conversations them two have had behind closed doors about this whole situation. If you didn't know, SZA had dated Drake in the past, and right before the whole back and forth, she featured on 2 of his songs. So I know that those two had to had some funny conversations about what happened. SZA says no, it's more like, "I thought it was really interesting that there was any consensus at all that you might be an angry individual. For me, I don't find that any energy that comes from you comes from an angry place. And actually, the last hour and change pretty much solidified that it's almost from a yogic monk-like place. But when you feel the surge of energy in records like that, where does that root? Is it anger?" And Kendrick says, "I don't believe I'm an angry person, but I do believe in love and war, and I believe they both need to exist. And my awareness of that allows me to react to things but not identify with them as who I am. Just allowing them to exist and allowing them to flow through me. That's what I believe." I don't know if I personally would say that I ever thought Kendrick was an angry person. If I'm thinking of angry people, I'm thinking of maybe Joe Budden or something. But going back to their conversation about vulnerability again, that does go for anger too. You never want to let someone see that they got to you, but you still have to let yourself feel that anger so it can pass. Euphoria is probably the angriest song of all the diss tracks, and I could see how he just wanted to get that shit out of his system. For all we know, he probably wanted to say that kind of shit for a while, but who's to say that he really does hate everything about Drake? But I can believe that he felt like that in the moment. Him saying that he let that kind of stuff flow through him kind of proves that to me. So yeah, those were the major plot points of this interview. Personally, I feel like he probably did it in a way to be, or at least try to be, more visible. Him being that mysterious artist is probably more of a coping mechanism, if anything. And after doing it for so long, he's probably ready to show more of himself. That's at least what I'm guessing, especially if he wants to move on from music to do other things. I highly doubt we're going to be getting him tweeting or jumping on IG Live or shit like that. But I'm pretty sure we're probably going to see more of him, probably more like, like Jay-Z and his 444 bag. Plus, with the Super Bowl coming up, I'm pretty sure we're bound to see more stuff like this. Some people want to see him do an interview where he specifically talks about the back and forth with Drake. Personally, I feel like something like this was enough. I honestly don't really care for him to explain his side. We was all there. We saw it happen in 4K. We heard the songs. We analyzed the songs. We watched 3-4 different videos of people analyzing the lyrics to the songs. We know what happened. I think we have a pretty good idea of where his headspace is at. If you made it to the end of the video, go ahead and do me a favor and type in the comment sections K-Dot's Bizarre Adventure so that I know you made it to the end of the video. If you haven't already subscribed, subscribe. Please and thank you. You're gonna be back. So go ahead and subscribe. And turn them notification bells on so that you get notified when I do upload. Hopefully one of these days I'll have a consistent schedule, but till then, those notification bells will probably be your best friend. Go ahead and comment down your comments, opinions. If you think I did a horrible job, put it in the comment section. I don't care. We'll read, we'll talk about it. Until next time, drive fast, take chances, and I'll see you in the next one.